At the beginning of the film, we are observing the interstellar spacecraft Avalon, which travels in space to the colonized world called Monastery 2. All rooms of the ship are empty, and it works on autopilot. 258 crew members and 5,000 passengers are in a state of gibernation, that is, in hibernation. Suddenly, Avalon passes through the asteroid belt. The energy of the ship is redirected to the main protective screen. One of the giant asteroids is faced with a ship, causing various malfunctions. The ship is trying to recover, but one of the hibernation capsules is erroneously activated. The awakened passenger is engineer Jim Preston. His capsule opens and the automatic system tells him that he spent 120 years in anabiosis, and only 4 months were left before arriving at the Obel 2. Jim can enjoy all the amenities of the ship, and he is instructed about the identification bracelet, cabins, and basic classes. With excitement, Jim is going to meet the rest of the passengers. It is included in the automated class intended for the training group. The hologram talks about the hopeless situation on Earth, mentioning overpopulation. However, Jim notes that in the class he is completely alone. He is trying to ask questions to the hologram, but understands that he will not receive answers. In a panic, he runs out of the class and begins to look for people. In the main hall of the ship, Jim finds an automated information rack. He asks to talk to a living person, but does not find anyone. On the captain's bridge, where he is trying to get, there is no one either. In the end, Jim goes to the observatory, where he finds out that the ship is actually located in the 90s from the Monastery 2. He is horrified to realize that something went wrong, and he woke up too early. The first thing that comes to his mind was to send a message to the ground with the question of what to do, but the communication system reports that the answer will come in 55 years. Jim feels devastated. Wandering around the ship, he finds a bar and sees another person. There is a hope that he is not alone, but the bartender seems strange to him. He later understands that this is an android named Arthur. Jim is trying to get information from Arthur, but cannot explain to him that he woke up ahead of time. The next morning, he goes to the dining room and quickly understands that most of the menu is designed only for luxury passengers. He takes coffee and thinks how to correct his capsule for gibernation. Jim finds tools and tries to bring the capsule into action, but when it goes inside, nothing happens. Then he decides to try to get into the compartment with the capsules of the crew, but this also fails. Jim returns to the bar again and again to talk with Arthur. Android advises him to hack one of the cabins of the luxury class and have fun on the ship. Jim tries different restaurants and entertainment, but over time, loneliness makes him more and more unhappy. Once, having drunk, he finds an air gateway with spacesuits and in despair decides to commit suicide, going out into outer space. He almost presses the lever, but at the last second he makes a change. Stumbling, he falls and accidentally notices the girl in the gibernational chamber. He is looking for her files and finds out that her name is Aurora Lane, and she is a writer. Having interested, he reads some of her works and discusses them with Arthur. Gradually, he falls in love with Aurora. Jim becomes obsessed with his irony. He went to another planet for the sake of a better life and an ideal woman, but now he is doomed to spend the rest of days alone. Gradually, the thought of Wake Aurora comes to his mind, but he hesitates. If he does this, he will doom her to life with him, never reaching the Monastery 2. He even discusses this with Arthur and decides not to wake her up. Nevertheless, the temptation is too large. Once he activates Aurora's capsule and runs away, later he is looking for her and finds her. She is bewildered, like him a year ago. Jim tells her that they are not sleeping and leads her to the observatory. Aurora, in horror, tries to return to his capsule, but Jim explains that there is no equipment for regibernation on the ship, and they are in a difficult position. They return to the lobby and Jim offers Aurora to relax as she just woke up. He returns to the bar and regrets his act, asking Arthur not to tell Aurora that he woke her. The next day, Aurora wakes up. Like Jim, she is trying to find out about the capsules of gibernation. At breakfast, they discuss the possibility of repairing them, but unlike Jim, Aurora is not ready to give up. She searches the infirmary and research documents, tries to hack the door to the compartment for the crew gibernation. Meanwhile, Jim notices all new malfunctions on the ship. Sometime later, Aurora mourns his life at Avalon. She writes, runs around the ship, and swims in the pool, gradually realizing the situation. She goes to the dining room to interview Jim, thinking that his story could be interesting. Aurora asks why he emigrated to the colony. Jim first meets the slogans of the company, but then admits that this was a chance to become someone in the new world. Aurora later tells why she is here. Unlike other passengers, she has a ticket there and back. She wanted to spend a year in the Monastery 2 and return to Earth to become the first journalist to make the greatest research in history. Over time, Aurora humiliates their position and falls into despondency. Jim is trying to cheer her up. Finally, he introduces her to Arthur in the bar, and she relaxes a little. Sometime later, they go on a date in the bar, have dinner, and tell stories about their life. After dinner, Jim leads Aurora to the gateway where he once thought about suicide. They put on spacesuits and go into outer space, enjoying an exciting sight. Returning aboard, they kiss, and passion flashes between them. Soon they begin to live like a couple. Aurora moves to Jim's cabin, and she writes about her life on the ship. They run together, eat and sleep. Jim explores the ship and finds a hydroponic bay from where it brings flowers for Aurora. On the birthday of Aurora, they celebrate it in one of the restaurants and then in the bar. Jim is preparing a ring that he made for Aurora, and she talks with Arthur. By chance, Arthur informs Aurora that Jim deliberately woke her. When Jim returns, Aurora meets him with distrust and runs away in rage. In the cabin, Jim discovers that all her things have disappeared. Aurora avoids him, and he tries to apologize, explaining his act. He says that she fell in love, but she doesn't care. She cannot forgive him for depriving her life. One night, another malfunction occurs on the ship. The ship is faced with a critical error, and the main system is turned off. Aurora enters the main lobby and sees that Jim put a tree there. Then she goes to the dining room where the food point does not work. Suddenly, they hear the voice of the head of the deck, asking who planted the tree. They run into the lobby and see the House of Moncusa standing in front of Jim's tree. They are presented and talk about their problems. Moncusa does not understand how 3 capsules could fail. He leads them to the bridge where he discovers that something is wrong with the ship, but information about the systems must be checked manually. He later checks the collected data when Aurora joins him. They discuss what happened to her capsule, but he cannot fix anything. Moncusa feels nausea after ambiosis and leaves to rest, coughing blood. 3 of them are again on the bridge. Moncusa finds out that something happened 2 years ago, destroying the main system. They need to find and fix the reason for the failure, otherwise the whole ship will fail. They go to look for a problem, but Moncusa loses consciousness, and Jim and Aurora take him to the infirmary. It turns out that he is dying, and there is no treatment that could stop his condition. Moncusa passes Jim his bracelet and orders the ship to repair, after which he dies. Suddenly, the lights on the ship change to an alarming red, and the ship begins to shake. Jim asks Aurora for help, and they run to the engineering unit. Another breakdown disables Arthur, and Jim has to deactivate it. Finally, they come to the engineering compartment and begin to look for a problem. They manage to find that the asteroid struck the gap in the ship's hull, and they glue it. Following the meteor trajectory, they understand that he damaged the reactor. They find the details and try to replace them in order to stop the heating process, but fail. Jim understands that he needs to open the ventilation door outside the ship to cool the reactor. He puts on a costume and passes Aurora Monca's bracelet, fearing that he may not return. Aurora says that he will not be able to live on a ship without him, but he leaves. Meanwhile, the temperature in the reactor block continues to increase. Jim understands that he will have to manually hold the door open to cool the reactor. Despite the objections of Aurora, he makes this difficult decision and convinces her that they should save other people's lives. Aurora releases air from the reactor and the plan is triggered, but the couples repel Jim and the cable that fastened it is torn. The pressure in his suit falls and he says goodbye to life, apologizing to Aurora. But she, without losing a second, puts on the second suit and flies out behind him. She manages to drag him inside, and she drags him into the infirmary, but unfortunately he is already dead. Aurora uses the Monca's bracelet to cancel medical protocols and reanimate it. The medical capsule performs its work and revives Jim. Aurora, beside himself with joy, forgives him. Later, she repairs Arthur, and they arrange space funeral for Moncus. Jim informs Aurora that he found a way to use a medical capsule as a capsule for a gibernation and offers her to go to ambiosis to the Monastery 2. However, she refuses and decides to stay with him. In the end, Jim makes her an offer, and they live on the ship together. 88 years later, Avalon arrives at the Obel 2. The crew wakes up and sees that the lobby of the ship has turned into a real paradise garden thanks to Jim's tree. Aurora completed the book about their life on the ship and left it to passengers. Here is such a happy end, friends. I also advise you to watch other videos on my channel. Good luck!